It's been 3 days, and the silence in this apartment is so loud it physically hurts. It's not our apartment anymore. The space where his armchair used to be is a gaping wound in the living room. His side of the closet is hollow, echoing. Even the stupid, chipped coffee mug he used every single morning is gone. He didn't just leave, he surgically removed himself from my life. My phone is a constant, humiliating reminder. A long, pathetic scroll of my own unanswered texts, each blue bubble a tiny tombstone for my dignity. I keep tracing it back, trying to pinpoint the exact moment everything shattered. It was just a Cold War, a stupid, childish disagreement. How the hell did we get from that to this? This absolute ruin, I just don't understand. Before this, we were an island of calm. Our evenings had a rhythm that felt like a heartbeat. He'd be at the stove, methodically chopping vegetables for dinner, a quiet half smile on his face as he listened to me rant about my day at the marketing firm. He was my anchor, the calm in my perpetual storm. He's a software developer, a man who finds comfort in logic and order, and for 3 years, that order was my sanctuary. What I mistook for peace, however, was just an absence of conflict. Henry doesn't do conflict. He's not a fighter, he's a fog. He'd just roll in, thick and quiet, and suffocate an argument before it could even start. I remember once disagreeing about a vacation booking where I'd messed up the dates. Instead of getting angry, he just said, "Okay, if that's what you think," and quietly fixed it himself. He paid the extra fee, but the unspoken tension, the feeling that I'd failed a test, hung between us for days. This time, it was his mother's 60th birthday dinner. It was a stupid, insignificant thing. I'd made a joke about his aunt's notoriously dry pot roast, a joke I'd made a dozen times before, one he usually chuckled at. But this time, in the car on the way home, the air grew thick and heavy. He didn't laugh. He just stared out the passenger window, his jaw set, watching the streetlights blur past. When I asked what was wrong, the shrug was almost imperceptible. Nothing. That was the first brick in the wall. By the next morning, the wall was a fortress. He answered my questions with single words, his voice flat. He made his own coffee, the clink of the spoon against ceramic the only sound in the kitchen, and retreated to his home office. He'd sleep on the absolute furthest edge of the bed, a chasm of cold sheets between us that felt wider than the Grand Canyon. A rational person would have given him space. A rational person would have understood this was just Henry's way of processing. But his silence wasn't just silence to me. It was a physical pressure in my chest, a low hum of panic that started in my stomach and radiated outwards. It was the exact same frequency of the silence my ex, Raphael, had used right before he vaporized my life with a two-sentence text telling me he'd met someone else. That breakup didn't just break my heart, it rewired my brain, leaving a scar that screamed at the first sign of withdrawal. So when Henry went quiet, a switch flipped. The logical part of my brain knew this was Henry being Henry. But the panicked, wounded animal part of me, the part that runs the show, was screaming that the floor was about to drop out from under me. I was losing control, and that was the one thing I couldn't bear. The second day of silence was a special kind of hell. I couldn't eat. The coffee I made tasted like ash, and the apartment, usually so full of our shared life, felt cavernous and hostile. Every creak of the floorboards was a question, every passing car a potential escape. My mind was a hamster wheel of worst-case scenarios, each one more vivid and painful than the last. He's met someone at work. He's finally realized he's too good for my brand of chaos. He's on his laptop right now, looking for a new apartment. The logical part of me, a tiny, fading voice, was whispering, "Just go talk to him, Imogen. Apologize for the joke, tell him his silence is killing you. Be an adult." But I couldn't. Apologizing felt like surrender. It felt like admitting that he held all the power, that his silence could break me. To knock on his office door would be me, on my knees, begging him not to leave me in the quiet. It was the same powerless position Raphael had put me in, and my pride, that brittle, stupid thing forged in the fire of past humiliations, would rather burn the whole house down than feel that specific shame again. So I did what I always do when I feel powerless. I reached for a grenade. I was sitting on the couch, the cold leather sticking to my skin, scrolling through my contacts with a shaking thumb. My heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. A voice in my head, the last sane part of me, was screaming, "Don't do it, this is insane. You're pouring gasoline on a spark." I knew it was wrong. I knew it with a clarity that was almost nauseating. But the urge to do something, anything, to shatter the silence, to provoke a reaction, was a physical craving. I wasn't trying to get back with Raphael. God, no, the thought of him made my skin crawl. This wasn't about him. It was a strategic deployment of chaos aimed squarely at Henry. I wanted to create a crisis, a problem so loud and immediate that it would force him out of his fog. I wanted to see anger, jealousy, anything but this placid, dismissive quiet. I wanted to remind him and myself that I existed outside of his silent judgment, that other people saw me, wanted me. I wanted to win. So I typed out the message, my fingers feeling like they belonged to someone else. I drafted and deleted 3 different versions before landing on the perfect one. Hey, stranger. Saw that old photo of us from the beach trip pop up in my memories today. Crazy how long it's been, hope you're doing great. It was perfect in its calculated innocence. Plausible deniability, just an old friend reaching out, but he and I both knew what it was a lure. I hit send before I could stop myself, the whoosh of the message leaving my phone sounding like a starting gun for a race to the bottom. I felt a sick, thrilling jolt of adrenaline mixed with immediate, ice-cold regret. For the first time in 48 hours, I wasn't the one waiting. I had made a move. I had taken back control by setting fire to the very ground I was standing on. That evening, I executed the final stage of my idiotic plan. I left my phone on the coffee table, screen up while it was charging. It was a deliberate, theatrical gesture of carelessness. I didn't lock it. I even made a show of going into the kitchen to start dinner. A noisy charade of chopping vegetables with far more force than necessary. The rhythmic thud of the knife on the cutting board, a drumbeat of my own anxiety. My entire nervous system was a live wire, attuned to the slightest sound from his office. I was waiting for the explosion. I craved it. I had a whole script in my head. He would storm out, phone in hand, his face flushed with anger. Who is this, Imogen? What the hell is this? And then we would fight. We would scream and yell and maybe even break a plate or two, and it would be awful, but it would be something. It would be connection. It would prove he still cared enough to be hurt. When he finally emerged from his office an hour later, my back was to him. I heard his footsteps pause in the living room. I held my breath, my grip on the kitchen knife tightening until my knuckles were white. The silence stretched for an eternity. Then I heard the soft click of my phone being picked up. I risked a glance over my shoulder, peering through the gap between the kitchen and the living room. He was just standing there, illuminated by the glow of the screen. I could see it perfectly. Raphael's name in the notification banner, his reply sitting there like a landmine I had deliberately placed. Hey you, long time no see, I'm doing great, that was a fun trip. We should catch up. I watched Henry's face, my own heart hammering in my chest. I was braced for fury, for betrayal, for the storm I had so desperately tried to conjure. But what I saw was so much worse. There was no anger, not a flicker, just a collapse. It was like watching a building quietly implode. The tension in his shoulders, the rigid line of his jaw he'd been holding for 2 days just dissolved. The frustration that had been simmering in his posture vanished, replaced by a profound, bone-deep weariness. He read the message, then slowly lifted his head, his eyes meeting mine across the room. There was no accusation in his gaze, just a quiet, devastating finality. He looked exhausted. He looked done. He didn't say a word, he didn't have to. He just placed my phone back on the table, screen down this time, with a quiet deliberation that felt more like a verdict than an action. Then he turned and walked into our bedroom, closing the door softly behind him. The click of the latch was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a lock I would never be able to open again. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't the tense, angry silence of a Cold War. It was the empty, hollow silence of a tomb. I stood there in the kitchen, knife still in hand, surrounded by the smell of uncooked onions, and knew with chilling certainty that I had just lost everything. I slept on the couch that night, if you could call it sleep. It was a fitful, shallow state of dread, wrapped in a throw blanket that smelled like him, a scent of sandalwood and clean laundry that was both a comfort and a torture. I kept telling myself it would be better in the morning. Morning would bring clarity. He'd come out, his anger from the night before cooled into something manageable. We'd talk, maybe he'd even yell. I just needed the sun to come up. But when I finally woke to the gray, unforgiving light of dawn, the apartment was unnervingly still. The bedroom door was ajar, a sliver of silence. I pushed it open, my heart a cold, heavy knot in my stomach. He was gone. It wasn't just that he wasn't in the bed. It was that his presence had been systematically, methodically erased. The indent on his side of the mattress was already gone. I ran my hand over the smooth, cool sheets where he should have been. His clothes were gone from the closet, leaving a row of lonely, spaced-out hangers on my side. The cheap band t-shirts, the neatly pressed work shirts, the hoodie he always wore on lazy Sundays all vanished. In the bathroom, his toothbrush was missing from the holder, along with his razor and the ridiculously expensive face wash I always teased him about. It was a surgical removal. I walked through the apartment like a ghost in my own home, cataloging the empty spaces that screamed his absence. His laptop was gone from the desk in his office, the charging cable coiled neatly where it used to be. His favorite books, a worn-out collection of sci-fi paperbacks, were missing from the shelf, leaving a gap that looked like a pulled tooth. He had packed up his entire life quietly and efficiently while I was sleeping a few feet away. He must have moved like a shadow, a phantom collecting his belongings, careful not to wake the person who had just destroyed him. There was no note, no final angry text, nothing. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely type in the passcode. I called him. It rang once, then went straight to voicemail. His voice, calm and professional on the recording, was a punch to the gut. I called again, voicemail. I sent a text, a frantic jumble of words. Henry, where are you? Please call me. This is a mistake. One gray tick. Delivered, not read. I tried WhatsApp. Please, we need to talk. I am so sorry. One gray tick. I went to Instagram to send a DM, a last-ditch effort. His profile, once filled with our photos, now just said user not found. Facebook the same. He hadn't just blocked me, he had deactivated everything. He had become a ghost. He had performed the digital and physical equivalent of ceasing to exist in my world. The control I had so desperately tried to seize the night before had boomeranged back and annihilated me. I was left standing in the rubble of our life, screaming into a void that wouldn't even give me the courtesy of an echo. For 3 days, I existed in a fog of panic and disbelief, surviving on black coffee and the dwindling sliver of hope that this was all some grand, dramatic gesture. That he would just walk back through the door, drop his keys in the bowl, and say, "Okay, are you ready to talk now?" On the fourth day, when the hope had curdled into a raw, annoying desperation that felt like a physical illness, I called Ava. She was our friend, but she was his first. I knew she'd have heard from him. I sobbed down the phone to her, a barely coherent mess of apologies and accusations. I told her everything, but I spun the story, casting myself as the tragic heroine. I talked about how scared I was by his silence, how it triggered all my old anxieties. I framed the text to Raphael as a misguided cry for help. I told her how he'd just vanished, how cruel and unfair it was to leave without a single word. I painted myself as the victim, the abandoned woman left bewildered in the wreckage. Ava listened patiently, letting me exhaust my torrent of self-serving justifications. When I finally ran out of breath, the line went quiet. It was a different kind of silence than Henry's. It wasn't empty, it was heavy with disappointment. "Imogen," she said, and her voice was so tired, all the usual warmth gone. "What did you expect?" "I don't know," I cried, my voice cracking. "A fight, a conversation. For him to tell me he was leaving, not just disappear." "A conversation about what?" she asked, and her tone was sharp now, cutting through my bullshit. "About you texting your ex because Henry wasn't giving you enough attention for 2 days. Imogen, this isn't the first time. You do this. You push and you push, you create these little loyalty tests that he never asked to take. You know what he's like, you know he hates drama more than anything. You keep poking a sleeping bear and then act surprised when it finally mauls you. What you wanted wasn't love, it was a reaction, and you got one. This is his reaction." Her words were like a slap, cold and stinging and utterly true. She was right. I hung up the phone, the last of my self-pity draining away, leaving only a hollow, echoing shame. I felt an insane urge to clean, to scrub away the last few days. I started with his bedside table, which he'd cleared out except for a few old receipts. As I was about to throw them away, I noticed the drawer was slightly ajar. I pulled it open. It was completely empty, except for a small, dark blue velvet box from Tiffany & Co. pushed into the very back corner. My breath caught in my throat. My world tilted on its axis. I knew what it was before I even touched it. My fingers trembled as I lifted the lid, a tiny, sickening click echoing in the silent room. It was empty. A perfect, ring-sized impression was left in the white satin lining, a ghost of a promise. A future I had just murdered. He hadn't just packed his clothes. He'd packed up our future and taken it with him. I sank to the floor, clutching the empty box to my chest, and the sobs that came out of me were no longer for his absence, but for my own catastrophic, unforgivable stupidity. I had been so obsessed with the fear of him leaving that I had personally handed him the suitcase and showed him the door. Now, weeks later, the silence is my only companion. It's no longer loud, it's settled into the fabric of the apartment, a permanent resident. I quit my job. Explaining my sudden, complete inability to function to my boss was a conversation I couldn't face. So I just stopped showing up. Most days, I don't leave the couch. The empty space where his armchair was has become the focal point of my life. My only activity, the only thing that punctuates the endless gray hours, is the ritual. I pick up my phone, my fingers moving on autopilot, and I open Instagram. I have a fake account one he doesn't know about. From here, I can still see him. His profile is public again. He didn't run away to a monastery, he just ran away from me. He posts things, a picture of a project he's proud of at work, a sweaty selfie from the gym, a beautiful, serene photo of a sunrise over the lake taken on his morning run. Each post is a perfectly framed image of a life moving forward, a life that is peaceful and orderly and completely, utterly devoid of me. It's a slow, meticulous torture that I inflict upon myself, scrolling and staring, zooming in on the background of his photos, looking for clues of a new life, a new person. Every like from a woman I don't recognize is a new stab of pain. Tonight, he posted a picture of a sunrise. The sky is all pink and orange. The caption reads, "New day, new beginning." And I just stare at it, my thumb hovering over the screen. He has his new beginning. And I'm still here in the ruins of our old one, trapped in the perpetual darkness of the morning he disappeared.